Does lightning strike twice when connected to stupidity? Join us today on The Breakdown to find out.
Okay, so we had the State of the Union this week. Can't think of too many people who enjoyed it, heard a lot of grumbling about it, but definitely something that we can weigh in on because firearms were sort of a theme.
Sort of. You know, Kevin, it's interesting how history repeats itself. It wasn't that long ago that we broke down for everybody the fact that founding fathers had some unique weaponry. We don't usually use weapon. We usually say firearms. But I mean, cannons aren't exactly a firearm. And that subject reared its head again, demonstrating that when we put the facts out here to break down, nobody on the opposition listens to the facts.
And we laid it out pretty clear. I mean, it's pretty clear that there were ships that were contracted by the U.S. military to fight against the Brits, and they owned cannons. They were given written declarations to own those cannons to go and fight for America.
But as we further explored, because we said some people could try to twist the whole idea of privateers, which were private ships that were contracted, as being kind of like the original Blackwater of their day. But we also proved that civilians, not contracted, had their own cannons, that Washington and others said, hey, can we borrow those? Can you bring those with you? Could we use those? And we also found out that founding fathers owned their own cannons. In fact, Washington, his cannons literally are on display, personal. They weren't gifts like, hey, you won Yorktown. Here's a cannon. No, they were his own cannons he kept there to defend Martha in his place.
Well, and here's my thing. And here's what I really just don't understand. Okay, it's not like these people don't have this information available to them. So, I mean, are these just blatant lies that they believe if told time and time again while the spotlight continues to be put on this information that it just becomes fact?
Well, I think it's not just yes, that would be the short answer. But let's look to some of the rhetoric that he uses in that speech when it pertains to the Second Amendment community. I mean, he immediately goes to mock all of us like we're stupid and think that deer actually wear Kevlar vests. That's just condescending as all get out, and there's better words for it, but we're on tape. So, one of the things that really chapped me about the whole deal is, part of the State of the Union, or as I would call it, disunion speech, because he didn't unify us at all on anything, was what's going on with the people of Ukraine and the Russian Federation right now. And that's absolutely tragic. And we here at CRPA, our hearts go out to those people who do not deserve what's happening in any way, shape, or form. But, it's always ironic to me, Kevin, that, a lot of good people in Ukraine went about their business every day, and they didn't own a very specific type of firearm, one used by current militaries. And as we know from this president, he doesn't believe any of us should have anything to even remotely resemble something like that he classifies in this dump definition called assault weapon. Yet, let's look at what he does. He gives the Ukrainian people the very weapons he said we shouldn't, because he said when a government is tyrannical or going against you, you, the average Joe, should be able to defend yourself. And since Ukrainians are good friends of Joe, they get those firearms. In addition, there's news reports on all the major networks that those firearms are also being shipped to other countries that border both the Ukraine and the Russian Federation. So it's like out of this side of Joe Biden's mouth, if you're in Eastern Europe and think that a bad guy might come, you get these from the American government. Oh, but if you live in America and fear a bad guy that might come, when crime's rampant, people are being killed, raped, and everything else at astronomical rates that we haven't seen in decades, oh, you can't have one.
Yeah, it's a little bit contradictory, isn't it? And
a tad.
To be honest, at the beginning of the speech, I was almost considering being hopeful because he was talking about how we tip our hats to these Ukrainians who have taken up arms against a tyrannical government that is attacking them. And that is the exact reason that our founding fathers thought that the Second Amendment was so necessary. I guess the only problem is that he can't seem to apply that at home because, like you said, later in the speech, he swings it back around to say, oh, well, cannons weren't able to be purchased when they wrote the Second Amendment, which again, is completely off. But I mean, how do you do that? How do you do that in one speech? I guess you can say he didn't write the speech. He just read it. I mean, he didn't read it very well, but he tried to read it.
Yeah, that'd be that whole, the good people of Iran are going to be happy with what's going on in Ukraine.
There were several people playing drinking games that had to take a drink every time there was a slur, and they were not sober by the end of the night.
Yeah.
I don't really understand how you make a claim to your country that these people should be applauded for defending themselves in this way and then not apply that exact same thing back home, especially when it has to do with something that's in our Constitution. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and furthermore, his whole concept, whether it was, well, let's go sue, companies because someone died. And it's sad, and we've said it over and over here. Our heart goes out to people who lose a life for whatever that reason is. But isn't it interesting, this is the same president said, I don't care if somebody may have been vaccinated during COVID and that cost them their life. You can't sue the pharmaceutical companies. So wait a second. Loss of life, in this example, you can sue everybody. Loss of life, in this example, you can't. That is the government sending two distinctly different contradictory messages.
Yeah, and I think what it comes down to is the old adage, rules for thee, but not for me. They want to be able to utilize these things for themselves when the time comes, when it's beneficial for them, when it's going to get them more votes, when it's going to protect them personally, but they don't want the citizenry having it, and that's how you establish control over it. And again, this is why our Constitution lays these things out, that the government should fear the people. That is the most important thing. The government should fear the people. And right now, especially in the state of California, I feel like that's not the case. Once we get that back, the threat of tyranny really kind of goes away. We get asked a lot, is that threat a real threat? Well, you're seeing it overseas right now. If you think this sort of thing can't happen, you're absolutely mistaken. And that's why we continue to fight here at CRPA for Californians to have these freedoms so that they can defend themselves when it's necessary.
And I think you also have to look at, speeches, especially, State of the Union speeches, are usually looking at what are the major political forces and harms coming to Americans and things that need to be corrected. And it's where the president makes an appeal, not just to the American public, but also to the legislature, that, hey, we all need to be on board to meet those demands. So we have a president that, depending on the poll you're looking at, was definitely south of the 40% approval rating.
For a while now.
One of the lowest that we've had since Jimmy Carter. A reestablishment of what looks remarkably like the Soviet Union coming back, which hasn't happened since Carter. By the way, Carter had 4 years to screw it up. This man's managed to do it in just over a year. We have gas prices that are at the highest point since Carter. Supply chain issues that have never been this bad since Carter. And with all these things that he has to tackle, keeping America safe, keeping us out of a nuclear exchange, convincing the American people that his blunder in Afghanistan didn't empower Putin to do this, which I think most people realize that ship has sailed, and it does. He chooses to spend a good 10 minutes of his speech on firearms and going after people. And a couple of things, I just want people to remember this. That isn't a major harm dealing in America. I'm not saying there's not issues that need to be cleaned up. There are. But his methodology was universal background checks. Okay, I have family in law enforcement. You and I have a lot of friends in law enforcement. Have we ever had a member of law enforcement who are like, dang, one of the things I love about being a cop is criminals always go and do universal background. No.
Not once.
Not once. Universal background check does not stop the criminal element. Number two, he never once talked about, hey, we need to round up the criminals that we know are felons that we know, like in California, have firearms. We know where they live. Nope, not doing that because we have people like Gascon in this state that can't wait to release them. In fact, I don't know if you saw Cory Booker at the State of the Union, but she's wearing a shirt that says 18,000 because she wants another 18,000 prisoners released by the president. Like, there was nothing about taking criminals that do harm and put them away. But you know what there was a lot about? Taking our guns away, the law abiding. And this is an attack on the American people.
And you know what? I mean, it's unfortunate to say, and we've been tackling the idea of this for the last couple of months, but he's got a voting base. He's got a voting base that isn't very knowledgeable on firearms, that is willing to vote based on that lack of knowledge of firearms.
Yeah.
And again, unfortunate, but I think that ultimately is what it plays to. There's a lot of negativity right now. There's a lot of negativity for not just the President of the United States, but there's also a lot of negativity surrounding senators and the governor in California and assembly people in California. I think that they feel a political tide that might be coming. So, you know, when people feel threatened is generally when they are the most dangerous. And that's the sort of thing that we're seeing right now, especially when it comes to the legislature. And if they feel like they have a voting base of people that will vote on anti-Second Amendment legislation, they're going to do it every chance that they get.
Yes, they are.
And that's why you see multiple bills going through California right now that literally read the same thing. It's just whose name is going to be on the bill, because that's something that I can tell people I did, which is why they should vote for me next time. It's really unfortunate that it is that way, but that's the situation that we're in right now. These legislators can be very dangerous to things like the Second Amendment, which is, again, why we're here, which is why all of us need to work to make sure that they don't get passed.
And I want to close on how do we make that work? Because, I mean, this is great, but all too often people like Kevin and myself and others get around a table and we highlight all these things and we gripe about them, and then we walk away either more depressed or somewhat like, well, that was that. But that doesn't move the ball, folks. And so you're going to hear Kevin and I talking about this at the conclusion of every video. How do we move the ball? You take the talking points in here, the things that we showed you of what they said is an out-and-out lie. And you don't just tell your neighbors, families, and friends. You encourage them to tell their neighbors and families and friends. Encourage them to get out there and vote and educate people. Take people to the voting booth. We have the opportunity now more than ever to turn things around. But if we get something worse than what we already have, it's our own fault because we didn't stand and fight. We need to do that. And one of the quickest ways you can do that, it's really easy, is step one. Go ahead, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and ring the bell so you're notified when these videos drop. Number two, join a chapter. If you don't have one, call Kevin and our staff. We will get one set up for you. Number three, once you join that chapter, start getting some skin in this game. And whether that's donating time or money, but definitely start doing something, because we all know what we get when we do nothing. And we look forward to working with you, meeting with you, and encouraging you in this battle to keep America, America.